Imagine turning on the news and watching armed gunmen storm your nation's highest court. Judges taken hostage, the building on fire. And when it was all over, some people who walked out alive vanished forever. On November 6, 1985, Colombia witnessed one of the darkest days in its entire history. Members of the guerrilla group M19 launched a calculated and devastating attack on the Palace of Justice in Bogotá. Inside were judges, lawyers, government employees, and ordinary civilians who had no idea what was about to happen. Within minutes, the nation's highest court transformed into a battlefield, and the entire country watched in absolute horror as events spiraled beyond anyone's control. Shortly before noon, heavily armed M19 fighters arrived at the Palace of Justice with a mission that stunned the entire nation. Gunfire erupted almost immediately. The attackers moved with speed and precision, quickly entering the building and seizing control of multiple floors. Hundreds of people were trapped inside with nowhere to run. Their stated goal was shocking in its ambition. They wanted to put the Colombian government itself on trial. Specifically, they wanted President Belisario Betancourt to answer publicly for alleged violations of peace agreements that had been made between the government and guerrilla organizations. Rather than achieving any political objective, however, they triggered a national nightmare that would leave scars lasting decades. The moment those first shots rang out, Colombia changed forever, and the world was watching every second of it unfold in real time. Inside the building were some of Colombia's most important legal figures, including sitting members of the Supreme Court. As the siege continued and the situation grew more desperate, hostages searched frantically for any form of safety they could find. Some hid beneath desks in darkened offices. Others barricaded doors with whatever furniture they could move. Telephone calls from inside the building began reaching family members and journalists on the outside, and the voices on those calls were filled with raw terror. Many begged for negotiations to begin. Many feared they would never leave that building alive. Outside, military forces quickly surrounded the structure and established a perimeter. Commanders assessed the situation and weighed their options carefully. The entire nation held its breath, waiting to see what decision would be made and what the consequences of that decision would ultimately be for everyone trapped inside. The Colombian military made the decision to retake the building by force, a choice that would define the entire event and fuel controversy for generations. Tanks rolled into position on the streets surrounding the Palace of Justice. Soldiers advanced toward the entrance with weapons ready. Then came the full assault. Heavy gunfire filled the air in sustained and deafening exchanges. Explosions shook the very structure of the building, rattling walls and shattering windows. The Palace of Justice had become an active war zone in the heart of the capital city. As the battle intensified beyond all expectations, a fire broke out somewhere within the building. Flames spread rapidly throughout multiple floors. Thick smoke filled hallways and offices, cutting off escape routes and making survival even more difficult for those still trapped inside. Some people who had survived the initial gunfire now faced the growing and merciless fire. Television viewers across Colombia watched the disaster unfold live on their screens, and many simply could not believe what they were seeing with their own eyes. By the time the siege finally ended, more than 90 people were dead. Among them were judges, civilians, soldiers, and guerrilla fighters. Much of the Supreme Court had been physically destroyed, its records and chambers reduced to ash and rubble. But an even darker mystery began to emerge almost immediately after the smoke cleared. Witnesses reported seeing several hostages leave the building alive after the assault concluded. Security footage and detailed eyewitness accounts appeared to support these claims with considerable consistency. Yet some of those individuals were never seen or heard from again. Families began demanding answers from authorities. Investigators launched formal inquiries into what had happened during and after the siege. Years passed slowly. Official explanations were offered and then challenged. Questions multiplied rather than diminished. What exactly happened to the missing hostages? Who bore responsibility for their disappearance, and why did some people vanish after having survived the most violent hours of the entire ordeal? The Palace of Justice siege remains one of Colombia's most deeply controversial and painful events to this day. Over the decades that followed, investigations uncovered mounting evidence of possible human rights violations committed during and after the military assault. Trials were held and officials were questioned under oath. New evidence surfaced periodically. reigniting public debate and media attention. Yet many families still believe with absolute conviction that the full truth has never been properly revealed or acknowledged by those in power. The fate of certain missing individuals remains officially unknown, suspended in a silence that feels anything but accidental. For those families, the nightmare that began on November 6, 1985, never truly ended. A government building under attack, a deadly military assault ordered in the heart of a capital city, a fire that shocked an entire nation watching from their living rooms, and hostages who vanished after surviving against all odds. More than 40 years later, the Palace of Justice siege stands as one of the most haunting and unresolved mysteries in modern history, a reminder that sometimes the biggest and most disturbing mysteries happen not in the shadows, but in plain sight, before the eyes of an entire nation. Like and subscribe to The Dark Files for more terrifying real mysteries and true crime documentaries.